All right. Hello, everybody. I think people are starting to come in. Let's see here. While you're coming in, if you don't mind putting in the chat where you're calling in from, see where people are dialing in from would be great. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us on a Friday. Looking forward to today's class. We'll give it a minute or so for people to join. But as people are coming in, why don't you go ahead and put in the chat where you're dialing in from? And Will and Kelly, you guys can see my screen okay?
Yep.
Perfect. So we'll just give it a minute or so while people are joining, then we'll get started. Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday.
All right, well, we're a minute in, so we'll go ahead and get started. People will continue to join. As people join, just put in the chat where you're calling in from, and then also let us know if this is your first class, put a 1, and if you know how many you've been to, put the number, otherwise just put 2 or more. It'd be helpful to see how many people are coming to us on a repeat basis. All right, seeing some 4s, some 6s, some 1s. That's great, guys. We appreciate the support. So I think appreciate that. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm sharing my screen here. So today's masterclass, or for the month of August, is we're going to go through reporting and looking at what modern planning, forecasting, and what AI looks like, looking at both NetSuite and some of the different options out there. Our agenda for today is we'll do some quick introductions to those on the call, and then we're going to dive into the different FP&A tools and planning complexity, kind of across the maturity spectrum of what people are doing. And that's usually some form of Excel and AI, maybe using your ERP NetSuite plus Excel and AI, or some people are actually using a collaborative, full-blown platform for FP&A and forecasting and AI. So we're going to take a look at each of those, some of the pros and cons of each. We'll touch on one of those platforms, which is Vena. You'll see learn a little bit more about that. And we'll just go through to round off our topics and some next steps. So that's the agenda here today, and we'll look to get into it now. Before we also get too far in, for those of you who don't know, our master classes are CPE certified. So for those of you who are CPAs or need CPE credit, it's complimentary, right? You don't have to pay to be here to get the credit. What you do have to do to get credit is you have to participate. It's just the rules. So what we need is we will launch 3 polling questions throughout the class, plus a survey at the end. As long as you participated in all those, you'll be eligible for the CPE credit, and our team will email out those certificates to you if you're eligible. So just wanted to get that housekeeping slide out of the way. And we will start with our first polling question. Let me go ahead and launch that. Oh, one sec. Let's see if I can find it. Not seeing that button really quick. Let me see one more. Give me patience, guys. One sec. Not seeing that. Well, if you guys can see the question on the screen, maybe do me a favor and type in the chat. We'll try to do that for now just so we can keep moving. Not seeing where the polling question usually is not showing up for me. So let's do me a favor, put it in the chat. how long you've been on NetSuite, 0 to 1 years, 2 to 4, or greater than 5. All right. Thank you, everybody, for participating there. So we will go ahead and keep moving now. So we want to start off with some introductions, right? So you may know me. Obviously, we put these on monthly. Dean Carazza with ScaleNorth, have about 15 years of experience, a lot in the NetSuite space, both as a user in private practice and then also as a consultant. Have led a lot of NetSuite implementations and a lot of experience on the NetSuite side of the house. But with us today, we have William Liang from ProLytics. Will has a ton of experience in the FP&A sector and industry, dealing with a lot of different clients. He actually helps support most of our clients when they're trying to get the most out of planning, AI, budgeting, things of those nature. He's going to share a lot of insights with you all today. And then we also have Kelly Starr, who's with ProLytics. I've known Kelly for quite some time. He actually used to work at ScaleNorth and head up our partnership channel. Kelly has a lot of experience in the space, both NetSuite and with Vena and planning. So the three of us are going to try to help facilitate here today to have a good session. So just wanted to get our introductions out of the way. So now we're going to go ahead and get into the content or the material. So again, the way that we've laid out this class is we really thought there's three different, areas that kind of touch on the various maturity curve of where people are at with, financial reporting, planning, budgeting, and things like that. The first one that we'll take a look at is Excel and AI, just using Excel with AI. The second one we'll look at is maybe using NetSuite plus AI and Excel. Usually you're using all three. And then again, the last one we'll take a look at is using an actual platform tool to do that. So to get started, I'm going to actually hand it over to Will, and he's going to walk us through what he's seen through his client base and prospects where they're using Excel and AI. Will?
Thank you, Dean, for having ProLytics and myself as part of your masterclass today. Folks on the call, ProLytics, we work with finance teams across that entire spectrum, that maturity model that Dean had outlined. Let's definitely start with stage one of that maturity model. And we could realistically take a look at what we could accomplish with Excel and AI in today's world. I do want to premise that we're not here to tell you that Excel's bad, that Excel is definitely an incredible FP&A tool, and for relatively simple reporting and planning use cases, it may definitely be the right answer, right? So if your finance team owns most of the budgeting, most of the reporting, you have a manageable amount of data that you're looking at, very few contributors, like I said, you may not even need another platform. So with that said, rather than talking strictly about it, I want to take you through a quick example of what that stage one may look like. And I will start by navigating over to NetSuite here, right? So I'm going to assume today that I'm a finance user using NetSuite, but I don't have a dedicated FP&A platform, right? So what I'm showing here, I'm in the Save Search area of NetSuite. And what I've done, I've created a very simple NetSuite Save Search that pulls all my GL transactional data. I put in a very simple criteria here, setting only bringing back any posted entries that are set to true. The results, I've defined all the various columns of my transactions that I want to bring in. I'm also brought in the department and the account code, and I'm simply going to save and run here. Okay. So that runs, the result is a transactional search of my data. And of course, nothing too sophisticated here. I'm sure most of the folks on the call have done this, exporting this back into Excel, right? So once that data is exported, now I could start leveraging it and working with that data into producing a monthly P&L. Right? So a couple of simple steps. What I've done right now, I've done that GL export. And more often than not, the data coming out of the transactional data, it's going to have the account, but it's not going to have the hierarchies, the roll-ups that is necessary or required to building your financial statements, right? So I've copied and pasted that search, the dump of the data over into this tab. And this next following subsequent tab, what I've done here is go from the GL account, the natural account. I've created some sections or roll-ups or parent groupings. And then, of course, I also had laid out a display of how we actually want to physically see that on the income statement, right? Very simple mapping type exercise here. Then finally, in the income statement, you'll see what we're simply doing. We're leveraging Excel, right? We're using the sum ifs. We're summarizing based on the categories, based on the mapping to get to producing an income statement like so, right? So I'm sure most of the folks on the call may have, have done some sort of exercise similar to this to produce your financials, right? So that's where, stage one, a lot of you have seen, but where I also want to now layer on what is different that we've seen more recently now with AI, right? So now that we have this produced, I could start leveraging some of the AI tools to start doing some things that would have taken us a long time to do in the past, right? So I'm going to analyze the data here. Firstly, I'm going to launch Copilot here, right? And I'm going to start actually a new chat here. Okay, so directly within Excel, I can start asking some questions on the data, right? So in here, I'm going to paste what are my largest variants. Rather than look through the entire income statement, I'm going to have Copilot answer a question like that.
And while that's thinking, Will, I want to tell everybody if you have questions as we're going through this, there is a Q&A section. So try to put your questions in there. We'll take a peek from time to time and see if we can answer some questions as we go through this. There will also be a Q&A section at the end. So kind of want to do a little bit of both, but yeah, feel free to use that Q&A section if you have questions as we're going through this. Thanks, Will.
Yep. So you see Copilot very quickly had identified some of those larger variances across all in my P&L, right? With a growth in revenue of 3.83 million over July and August. You can see that right there. There's obviously some expenses categories that also went up. We could take this data and let's go a little further, right? Which expense category should I pay attention to? So I'm going to paste that into a prompt as well. Okay. So now it's really telling me now these are the different categories that I really should be paying more attention to as that increase is very significant, right? So again, you could spend a lot of time with prompts directly in Excel to analyze data on the actuals. We could spend a lot of time on that, but for the purpose of today's time, I'm gonna just give you, that briefing, that capability, and then now I'm actually gonna the really part I really see a lot of value is it creating now that narratives and producing a summarized view, right? So right now I'm going to create a new prompt here. I'm going to ask it to summarize all these results from the management team and create a management view that's now ready to be presented at a board meeting or a leadership meeting. So this one will take a little bit of time. It's going to go through the different signals, the sheets, and identify those core KPIs, right?
While it's doing that, Will, if it takes a sec, we do have two questions in the Q&A. Yeah. So maybe another third one just popped up. So I'm going to maybe ask you. So Kimberly said, can you find variances by dollar and percentage combo of both?
Oh, yes, for sure. Yep, you definitely prompt it. I put in pretty generic prompts here, but yes, you could definitely be more detailed by looking at percentage increases, variances, columns. Yep, for sure.
Okay. And then Rachel asked, do you have any recommendations for FP&A software that is able to interface with NetSuite? I know the answer to that one, but maybe I'll let you talk through that. You'll see that we'll be showing that later, but Will?
Yeah, for sure. I think when we get to the stage 3 of the maturity model, we'll definitely go through where we would recommend the FP&A platform that natively connects and extends NetSuite. We'll definitely go through that in stage 3 of the model. Yep.
Okay, thanks, Will. And then the third one was Insloff said, I assume we can MCP link with Claude as well.
Yes, for sure. For sure. Yep.
Okay, cool. I think that hopefully we got some questions, all of them answered so far. I'll check back to you, Will.
Yeah, yeah. And while it's still assembling the dashboard, I think another question that we commonly get asked is when you should use Claude versus Copilot versus ChatGPT. That's another area there's definitely an overlap, and all three are evolving quite rapidly. So I wouldn't really think about choosing one tool forever on top of the other one. Where I've seen when I'm usually in Excel or in a Microsoft environment, I feel Copilot is usually the natural fit. It helps me work with the formulas, summarize things very quickly, and it's interacting with the tools within my Microsoft stack. When I'm looking at data more from an exploration or asking of the data, if I was just looking at the GL export itself, I typically use something like ChatGPT. They're very powerful in doing that analytical work. And then finally, Claude I usually use when we're processing a lot of data and there's a lot of information that we want to reason in depth. Their models seem to perform the best on that one. Okay. All right. So it looks like it's almost completing the generation. For the purpose of time, let me see here. I do have Okay, I think it's still running, but I do have a completed example here that I'm going to pull up here rather than wait for it to complete. Give me one sec here. It's going to launch. Second here.
I know one disclaimer on our end too. I don't know if we're normally hooked up
Yeah.
to demo environments, which are usually a little bit slower. So I always have to give that disclaimer.
Okay, yes. That's just as I was saying. So it built out this whole tab, right? And I did not even have to make any formulas. I didn't have to copy and paste anything. Copilot directly in Excel was able to generate this management summary for me, create a briefing along with those same expense that it had asked me to watch out for, and also outline some of the management priorities, right? So immediately, it's able to summarize, analyze the income statement in minutes, right? Cool.
Very cool.
All right. So that's stage one. Maybe
Let
we
me
pivot
share my
back to
screen. I'll
the,
bring back
yeah,
up the deck just to reiterate some of those points, Will.
great.
Um, so I think you just went through the example, and then I guess here are some of the points. Do you agree with kind of the summary here?
For sure, for sure. So you saw from that brief demo, right? The question really wasn't about replacing Excel, but how we get more of it now, even more and so now that we have AI. One area, right, that we're under the assumption here, obviously, is that governance is still manageable, right? It's me, maybe another analyst on my team that's using the tool. But when we get to the point where there's more contributors, more entities, more frequent forecasting, that's when we'll probably want to look into stage two and stage three, right? So I think that's a good wrap up to stage one and how we can leverage now AI to do some of those analytical work that finance has traditionally been asked to, but it takes a lot of time too.
Perfect. No, thanks. Well, I think that was great and helpful. We're going to go ahead and switch gears to, the scenario two, which is using NetSuite, maybe with some Excel and AI and what some of those things that we're typically seeing. So I'll go ahead and let me stop sharing this deck. Let me see here. And I'll bring up NetSuite. Can you see NetSuite okay, Will?
It is, yep, I could see a gauge. Yep.
Okay,
Mhm.
perfect. I'm going to challenge myself to try to use this is the NetSuite Next UI. So they're slowly rolling that out to different people as they do the release previews. I believe 2026.2, you have the option to opt in and try this out. So I'm going to try to go through it. I'm still stumbling a little bit as we're getting used to the new UI and interface, but you should see NetSuite here. And typical examples that we're seeing from a reporting capabilities, how you would maybe use NetSuite for different things. The first one is using their analytics or analytic workbooks. So here is an example of a pivot chart that's showing you your revenue, your cost of goods sold, and your gross profit, kind of more from a trend perspective. Now, it's a pretty decent visualization. You could put it on your home dashboard. You can refresh it, it's real time, right? And it's very similar to an Excel type workbook where you'd have a pivot chart or a pivot table. So that's showing you what these examples look like. Underneath, they have the same thing more in a pivot table format. Once that loads. So here's basically showing you more in a table format, which subsidiary, income, cost of goods sold, gross profit. So helpful, right? Right here on your home dashboard. And then thirdly, to show another example, here's maybe my revenue by class. And this is somewhat interactive, right? You could expand, collapse. If you're familiar with pivot tables, you're doing it right now in NetSuite, not even having to go to Excel. But some of the challenges or limitations, it's not super collaborative, right? Uh, it's not super easy to, operate as a user. You got to get a little used to kind of expanding, collapsing, maybe resizing the columns and things, but is super helpful for sure. I mean, if you're not taking advantage of this feature to be able to summarize and slice and dice your data and display it out visually, I mean, it is helpful. So this is the one area that we see. The second area that we see in NetSuite is out of the box, it has budget. It has the ability to do budgets and budget versus actual. If you really need something more robust than just running a budget versus actual report, you would need either a separate NetSuite module that they sell, or you would start to look at other tools outside, other plugins, things like that, which we'll show later as an example. But to show what is available and what most people are using out of the box is the budget process. So in here, I can just search up for budget. And you can see here's our list of budgets. You can set these up. If we were to go into one of these and edit, you can see it's a pretty basic UI and pretty basic setup. You set what subsidiary it's for, what year it's for. You can actually set up a budget category. So you can have different, I guess you would call these categories, or you can maybe use them as scenarios. So you can slice and dice your data by that way. And then it's really just keying in what your budget numbers are for the specific accounts that you have. So I can key in some revenue. Maybe I'm going to fill in a number here. I can go ahead and fill it across the way. Pretty basic setup, but once you have your budget set up, then you can run budget versus actual reports right out of NetSuite. So to do that here, you can now search for these things with Ask Oracle. The UI is a lot different, as you can see. You don't really have a lot of tabs up top to click on, but you can search your way for everything. So we'll go to a budget versus actual report right out of NetSuite. Here it is. One disclaimer that's a little bit of a limitation or kind of annoying is I couldn't figure out why my budget data was not showing up here. You see budget amount is zeros all the way down. That's because this report only works if you run it by financial period. It's a setting in NetSuite that you have to toggle back on for this to actually work. So to show you, you got to go into your preferences and you have to go to analytics. And you see right here where I have report by period set to never. That's why that report's not working for me at the moment. As soon as I switch it to say financials only or all reports, in this case, I'm going to just do financials only and save. If we go back to that report, let's see, and now run it, now my budget data is showing up, right? So it's just another little limitation. I was literally freaking out prepping for this class why I couldn't get the budget number to show up. And it was just a simple setting. So I think that shows you an example of how maybe, users are interacting with budget and actuals. It might get you by, but it's not really meant for forecasting. What we've seen some people do is because you can have different categories here, sometimes they'll create a budget category called forecast, and they will manually, on a monthly basis, go and update columns with actual results and kind of manually maintain a forecast scenario. So that is an option. It's not great, but it may get the job done. That's typically what we're seeing from our clients if they're using NetSuite's out of the box budget versus actual reporting. And then the third example I want to show that we're seeing I still find not that many users know of this feature, but there is the ability to do what's called an Excel web query in NetSuite. Certain reports are available for web query. So as an example, I'm going to bring up a trial balance, which is what most people would want in Excel. So here's an example of a custom trial balance report that we built. And if we hit customize and you go to more options, you see there's this option to allow web query right here that's checked. As long as that option's available on a report, you can refresh that report into Excel, right? One limitation, financial statements are not available. So you kind of have to do it with the trial balance or other reports and pull them into your Excel. So as an example to show what this looks like, I'm going to go back, I think. Let's try it. All right, I'll just bring up that report one more time. Let's see. Oh, wrong one. One more time here. Okay. So here's the report. Now, the way that you get it into a web query so you can do it in Excel, there's this icon right here that says web query. If you click on that, it's going to download a web query file. You hit open, and it's going to open up this Excel. Will, can you see, is it prompting me for an email dialog box?
I do see, yeah, and it says enter your email address.
Yeah. So basically, once you open that file, it's prompting you for what your email address is that you're associated with. So I'll put mine in. And then use this value for future refreshes and hit OK. You see it's going and getting the data right from NetSuite. So it just pulled my trial balance report right into Excel. And in the future, all I have to do is come here and hit refresh, and it will pull the latest data into Excel. So once you have that, you don't have to go copy and paste, download reports, copy and paste them into your workbook. You can have a refreshable version already in your Excel workbook. And then where this typically goes is you can start to build out, if here's your trial balance report, you can start to, similar to what Will was showing in Excel, you start building out your own formatted, here's cash, here's income, and I'm using some if statements to go basically summarize the values from this trial balance report. So this is an option that we've also seen used. One of the challenges is it's not really meant for collaboration. Only the person who downloaded this report with their credentials is the one who's able to refresh the results. So if I emailed this workbook over to Will and he wanted to go change the date ranges of the report, he can't because it's not his report. It's saved to my credentials. So there's some limitations there, but if you're not doing a ton of collaboration and you got somebody kind of maintaining the file, might get you by for a while, right? This is one thing that we've seen. And then the next topic was going to show within NetSuite. It is evolving fast to show a little bit of AI. It's relevant with NetSuite Next. We can see here now, I have an Ask Oracle feature here, and I can go into my chat history. I have an example of where I asked it to basically create us a financial summary. So here's my prompt. I want you to prepare an executive summary that will include charts and graphs and easily explain my overall financial health. Include some ratios such as DSO, gross profit, right? Just give it your prompt. It ran through and basically prepared this output here. Right in NetSuite, not Claude, it's not ChatGPT. This is Oracle's AI available here. Kind of cool. It's sourcing right from your NetSuite. It's even including links to the reports that it used to prepare this information, so I can validate it with an income statement, balance sheet, or AR aging. But it kind of stops here, at least from what I've seen so far. I got to keep testing and playing out with it, but it's really right now mostly just an insights and inquiry and research tool. So it kind of touches on similar to what Will was showing. That's if we're doing it directly in NetSuite Next, which again is still being rolled out at the moment. And then the last version, which would be very similar, is if you don't have access to NetSuite Next, which most people don't yet, then I think a lot of people are still messing around with the MCP connectors to NetSuite. So you can connect ChatGPT or Claude to your NetSuite and try interacting that way. So here's a similar example where basically I have Claude hooked up to my NetSuite environment, and I went in and asked it to prepare a financial summary and kind of had to go through a couple iterations because it's pulling what it thinks it should as the basis for the financial reports. Um, it's not like it's guaranteeing to use financial statements. So as a perfect example, on first pass through, when it tried to pull this, it wasn't tying out to the financial statements. I did a quick check myself and I'm like, what the hell, Claude? This doesn't tie out to an income statement. It doesn't tie out to a balance sheet. And it said, oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Let me try again. Right. And what it said after is it said, I realized I completely missed $1.82 million of inventory, $1.4 million of accrued liabilities, and some cumulative translation adjustment. So I had to tell it to, hey, I want you to make sure that you're going to tie out to the financials. See, I need everything to tie to NetSuite financial reports. And then it went through and gave me what that output was, which is actually pretty decent. You could download this to Excel. And this is what it looks like. It gave me an executive summary. It gave me a report tie out. You can see here, it's saying that everything ties out. It validated it. Here's your financial statements, cash flow, some assumptions for drivers that are being used. Similar to what Will said, it just created all this stuff. Now we have the hard part of like, is it right? Right? Does it even what I wanted? Right? And that's kind of where the challenge would be. But at least the prep time alone, I don't know how long, right, Will, it would have taken to try to prepare a 6-tab workbook like this. Right? So hopefully that gives you a little flavor of what we're seeing kind of on the NetSuite side, where some of the pain points and limitations are. I'm going to go back to the deck really quick. Let's just get to where we were. So again, what we're typically seeing if you're using NetSuite in Excel and AI, probably not as many contributors, right? Sharing that workbook around, probably not super easily. It's still somewhat mostly manual, maintaining your budgets in the budget screen or module. There are AI capabilities, as you've seen, whether through NetSuite Next or you want to connect your own Claude or MCP. And I think that hopefully touches on that. So let me just check the Q&A really quick to see if we have any questions. It looks like we have two. Inslav said, is this feature available to other non-financial reports, inventory or transaction reports? If you're talking about that web query feature, you just got to go bring up the report, go to customize, go to more options. And if you see that web query checkbox there, you can use it. That's the easiest way. It is available on quite a few reports, but I do know it's not available on financial statements in Sloth. And then the other question from Kimberly, can one trial balance include multiple entities across columns? Good question. It wouldn't be across columns, but it would be in the rows. So if you keep it open-ended, your data set, it can return all data, all subsidiaries, all date ranges, all whatever, and that's what usually most people do. But then you'll hit another limitation at some point. If you're pulling in that much data into Excel from NetSuite, you'll start to get some performance issues, right? And that's where a lot of the Excel solutions can crap out at some point. It's not meant to have every transaction in your NetSuite sitting in an Excel spreadsheet, right? So hopefully that helps answer that question, Kimberly. Okay, and I think up next we're good for another polling question. I think I figured out how to launch that now, so let me try again. So weird. Doesn't show it. It's just showing me a survey. So again, we'll just for now to keep moving. I'll have to figure out why I don't usually have this problem. Let's put it in the chat. The question is, what tools is your team primarily using for planning and forecasting? 1, NetSuite reports only. 2, Excel or Google Sheets. 3, a dedicated FP&A planning solution. Or 4, a combination of the above. Go ahead and put it in the chat if you don't mind to help us out. Looks like a lot of combination of all of the above. Kind of makes sense. Okay, perfect. Thanks everybody for participating there. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Will to take us through our third option.
Thanks, Dean. All right. Just to quickly recap, right, what we've seen so far. Stage one, you saw me take a safe search, export that, the GL, move that into Excel, start doing analysis there. Through Dean, you saw a couple of native or built-in ways within NetSuite to do that. The underlying gets exported back into Excel. In stage three, what we're going to do here, I'm going to log into a purpose-built FP&A tool called Vena. I'm starting here within their data feeds area. As you can see here, Vena has a built-in connector directly to NetSuite. So all the different save searches, what we've created there, it's all accessible directly inside Vena as well, right? So what this means, NetSuite remains your system of record, but we're bringing these actuals in directly into the FP&A tool on a scheduled basis. It allows us to then combine the actuals with our budget, with our forecast, and other operational data, right? So really the goal of the FP&A tool is to bring over those actuals from the different areas, not just your GL, but potentially other operational type data sources, and combine that into one centralized database, right? Now, I'm going to now pivot over into the task menu here. Think about this task menu as a listing of tasks that governs our budget process here. Okay, so obviously in a live scenario, when we start involving multiple departments, there's going to be multiple owners involved in the budget cycle here, right? So what an FP&A tool really should allow you to do is to create those different workflows, those different approval chains, set the different due dates and the sequencing to kind of govern that process, right? So to begin, just to show the functionality of Vena, I'll start off with just a report here, right? So I'm going to navigate into the report area of Vena here. I'm going to open up a P&L report. So this one obviously was created inside Vena, very different than the way that I would have had to create and wrestle and create the one in stage one. Okay. So you'll notice the P&L opens up in native Excel. What's different is that there's a connector here that facilitates the data between the Excel spreadsheet and that centralized database that I talked about. What has also popped up here is what we call the choose box. Think about this as really a runtime parameter where I could specify what data I want to retrieve back on this report. Now, recall when I had to create those different groupings, the different hierarchies and roll-ups, those had to be done in formulas through a mapping table. You'll notice that here built in here, you have the capabilities to create different roll-ups and look at data in different varying levels of your organization, right? So for department, we've segregated between revenue departments or support cost center departments. You'll also find that we've created a hierarchy for the different years. And then, of course, to reflect your fiscal or calendar periods. And then the different scenarios, right, that you would typically find. We're looking here specifically for budget. Of course, you could have different scenarios built in as well. Another big part of what an FP&A tool should have. Once I click apply selection here, what it does is sends that request in back and tries to retrieve that data back from the centralized data store. And you'll see once it was a blank Excel file, now gets populated with the latest data straight from that NetSuite integration that we saw earlier, right? So how we like to describe it, really think about Vena using Excel as a lens into that data, right? So you'll see here, this report has that same structure that we saw earlier. It has the data across all the actual periods. What we've also now brought in is an area for us to look at budget and plan as well, right? Another cool capability is the ability to drill down, right? So obviously through the modeling, as we brought into the data, a lot of this information has already been aggregated up into a model. Now, obviously, as accountant finance people, we also want to be able to drill back into that source of truth, right? So on any given cell here, extending Excel's capability is this drill capability. So if I want to look at that fee income, that 4,000 account, by me drilling down, this will give me a breakdown between where that revenue is earned across all my different entities, right? So all that information now is drilled down to the lowest level. I also want to highlight that we have the ability to drill back down to the transactions as well. So I'm going to use, perhaps, let's use this cost of goods sold here. I'm going to drill into the transaction. Okay. Oh, there's no data here. Let me try this one here. Bear with me here. I'm going to try drilling into that same fee income account here. Okay, there we are. So now you'll see within the transactions, we actually drilled back down to those specific GL transactions. So with the underlying invoice information, the vendor or the customer, the invoice ID, the address, etc. Right? So it gives you that drill capability and really, extending Excel's capability here. The ability to audit things on the data, how often, when it was last refreshed. That's again capability that in stage one of the maturity model, it's going to be really dependent on the last person that runs that refresh, right? Okay, so that's a flavor of how Vena leverages Excel as an FP&A tool, right? Let me navigate back into our workflow here. And again, back on this tab here, really think about it as a listing of tasks that we've assigned to the various budget contributors in our process, right? You'll find in here, let's take one example, right? So for expense planning, for example, it's a separate task that we've assigned to our marketing owner. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this template here. You'll see each of these tasks are assigned instructions, right? So as the finance owner, I could assign instructions letting the marketing owner know that we're expecting you to input these your budget here through this template. And let's open this up here. Okay. One thing I do want to call out here is that instead of creating a separate workbook for every department or entity, the goal is to create a streamlined template that allows us to interact with that same governed model, right? So you'll notice that in here, I can specify and choose for a specific entity. I'm going to click apply. It's going to filter on marketing expenses pertaining to our business advisory entity here, right? So now within this workbook, as mentioned, you'll still get the same actuals, the same source of data. You notice all the data coming up until the current period. Now we have also the ability to forecast and budget for the open period, right? So some of the built-in capabilities you also see here, some drivers that we could assume. So if we want to use a spread in our data, a simple example, obviously, if we want to do it evenly spread for our supplies, I could take 12,000 and you see the Vena template spreads that data across the columns. If I want to use a seasonal spread, we could do that. If I want to leverage last year, right? So if it's a type of cost that we know for licenses, it's a recurring fee, and we could take that amount and spread that according to last year. If it's a staff function, we could again spread it evenly or leverage some of these built-in assumptions. You'll notice here, this one is an uptick from last year, a 10% increase from last year, leveraging that same type of spread. There's also capability here I want to mention to do below line GL inputs, right? So you saw earlier in the NetSuite budgeting tool is where you're limited to budget at the GL account level. In Vena, you're allowed to budget what we call in line item details, right? So this allows you to budget in further granularity. So for example, if I want to say for account 6001, there's going to be an additional conference in next year, right? I could do something like that, and this would allow us to put in an amount. Okay, and you could have, of course, more than one of these line item details on any given account, other events, right? And what Vena does here, it summarizes those numbers up into that GL line, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click Save Data here. Okay. And let's presume here now I have completed my input. I'm happy and ready to submit this information back. I click Finish. Okay. And I can bring us back to Vena here. Okay. All right. So to close out the approval task, you also notice here there's collaboration. I think that's one big differentiator into stage 3. Now we're at a stage now I can communicate back to my finance team. I have completed my budget. I could utilize the chat and capabilities within here to collaborate and notify other folks and really making this process more collaborative across the organization. So again, here you'll notice I've submitted it with a comment. And now what we've really been able to accomplish now is that we're moving beyond just having finance work with their forecasts when the actuals. We're going to have own marketing, P&C own people and culture. We're going to have own operations budget, right? And really that's the goal that we want to get to, that everybody's contributing to that governed planning process, right? And that's where this workflow engine really goes beyond that spreadsheet approach, right? With that said, I know AI was another point of discussion that we definitely want to highlight. Now, within Vena, there's also Vena Copilot. Okay. So now that we have all that information gathered across the different departments, now we have a governed model. It just makes that layering of that AI more meaningful and more powerful, right? So just to show you a couple examples here, I know running on time here, I'm gonna go ahead and put in a couple prompts here, right? So similar to what I've done before, I could prompt, but now I'm not prompting on an Excel sheet with some data that I refreshed. We're prompting the data in that governed model that we've built together across the organization. So my first question here, what are the largest and favorable year-to-date variances? First is my budget. Okay, give me one sec here. Let me start up again here. Okay, here. Okay, so I'm going to select the model that we're looking at.
Will, so you're saying this is using Copilot?
Yep, this is Vena Copilot that's built into Vena. And the difference is that this is, again, the key is that it's not reading off a static spreadsheet, it's reading off that model, right? So you'll see here, it's giving me that aggregated figure on what the actuals and the budget is. And of course, again, similar to before, now we could start going further, right? But now because we've gathered all the different organizations' data, we would get a better insights on what those driver is, not simply looking at the GL level, what the EBITDA variance is, but now we're going to be able to figure that out more. And of course, I'm sorry here that this was tested prior. I apologies. Of course, Murphy's Law here. Let me try my next prompt here, which I had identifying the 3 drivers that's important. Let's see here. Okay. Okay, there's no decline. Okay, this is good. So this is actually what I expected. I wanted to actually trick it into thinking there was a decline, but actually it's telling me that there was no decline in our EBITDA, right? But instead the EBITDA was increased significantly. So that was by intention on my prompt here. So which is good. So now my final prompt here, just another example, is if the EBITDA of revenues were down by 5%, what would be the remaining forecast for the remainder of the year? So again, it took all the different inputs across the organization, and it's really trying to figure out what that is, right? So it's giving me step by step and how they computed to this number, assuming that 5% decline and what that adjusted EBITDA would look like, right? Okay. All right. I think that's a natural spot for me to hand it back over to the, I guess, the slides, Dean.
Okay. That's helpful. Well, let me bring it back up really quick. And again, if there's any questions, please put them in the Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you, Dean. So to summarize that stage 3, right? So we obviously saw that the nature of the problem has changed. We're forecasting monthly. We're going to get multiple entities and operational folks involved, more sophisticated reporting. That's when the point where you need to turn to a more purpose-built FP&A tool that you saw, right? So in short, when you get to a point where workflow is important, governance is important, collaboration is important, that's where we see, in terms of that maturity model, you're entering into stage 3, right?
Perfect. Thanks, Will.
Mhm.
And then I think maybe, yeah, you wanted to take the next few slides, Will, too, or you and Kelly?
Yeah, for sure. So I know Venna, you saw me showcase that. It's a little bit more briefing on Venna as an application. It's been focused on FP&A for over 13 years. They have over 1,800 customers and over 100,000 users. And I think they have a very strong blueprint as well for the NetSuite ecosystem as well. So for NetSuite finance teams like yourselves, I think the important thing to highlight is that Venna does not try to replace NetSuite. NetSuite is also obviously the system of record, but where Venna comes in, it layers on top of the planning, forecasting, the reporting, and the collaboration, right? And a differentiator, as you saw throughout, is that we see finance teams resort back to Excel. That's why Venna leverages that familiarity of Excel, using it as a lens into the data, but also layered on top is that FP&A control, the workflows, the security, and now the AI capabilities as well, right? So think simplest terms here, really think about Venna as an Excel with that FP&A control, with that AI-powered finance engine, and it allows you to connect and extend NetSuite data.
Perfect. Thanks, Will. That's helpful. And then Kelly, I think you were going to maybe chime in here.
Yeah, I just thought I'd jump in. So as we've looked at these 3 different planning models and getting into the third section where we're using a platform, I thought it'd be interesting to summarize, some of the things that we've seen where NetSuite and Venna were combined, and kind of look at what were the pain points, or what actually drove the decision to maybe look at that third level of planning. And so, not going through this entire thing, we'll provide this deck to you, and you can see the details. But some common themes are you're seeing manual processes. When the team is larger, a lot of it Excel spreadsheets scattered about, a little bit of Excel spaghetti, and the time to get things done is just slows things down, slows the reporting, slows the ability to make decisions off that data. So some of these cases here, we've got the actual value delivered. And so again, without reading through this, what you're seeing is a significantly faster turnaround in getting things done, the ability to spend more time on decision-making analysis instead of pushing spreadsheets back and forth. So again, common themes here. And then I think with the integration that you saw, you're eliminating some of those downloads. The other thing that's worth noting is that a lot of the more complex planning models are outside of finance. They're looking at operational planning models. Then it has over 100 different connections. So if you're using Salesforce, or if HR is a key driver that you're looking at, other types of things, Venna's pulling that together. So I think that's a value that you'll see outside of just looking at the NetSuite data. You're really getting a consolidated view. So,
Okay. Thanks, Kelly. And this one, I think
Thanks, Kelly. Yep. One of the closing slides here, I think, to summarize, one of the big takeaways is that AI and planning software and platforms are complementary, not competing technologies. AI, obviously, as you guys have seen, incredible, powerful at helping us discover the insights quickly, explain performance, and automate a lot of the work, right? But where you see where the planning platform really kicks in is putting structure around that intelligence, right? Doing the collaboration, governance, workflow, security, wrapping that all with connected data. That's really the power of the planning platform, right? And that's really the evolution that we described today. And I really hope this was a helpful session for folks on the call. With that, I think there's one final polling questions, and we could
Yeah, let's see if I get it
open
this
up.
time, you guys. Geez, the
Yeah.
third time's the try, and I think I found the button. It was hidden while I was sharing screen. So I'm going to launch the third one. Oh, can you see it? Do we see a third polling question? What business area are you in? No, I see it, but it's not launched, maybe. Not sure here. So I'll have to look into what's going on with the polling quizzes and questions. But again, for now, if you're not seeing it, just put it in the chat. I would appreciate that, and we can keep moving. So, are you within finance and accounting, operations, sales, or IT? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Quite a bit of 2s. Some operational folks on the call. That's helpful. We were expecting a lot of finance and accounting people given the topic at hand, and got some IT folks as well. So it looks like a pretty good blend. Roy classified 1, 2, 3, and 4. He's all of them. And that's not uncommon either. So appreciate the help there, guys. Don't know what was going on with our polling questions here today, but I think from there we were just going to go into Q&A to round out the remainder of our time. I'm going to stop sharing really quick. And I think I did see one question in the Q&A. Roy is saying, in prompting, I've learned to pre-prompt questions with do not lie, do not assume, and do not hallucinate to prevent the LLM from doing so. Do you find that Vena is more rigid than with an MCP connector to NetSuite like Claude? Will?
No, I like that. I think that premising your prompts with those, I've seen actually work really well too. Now, Vena, again, the big difference is that when it's prompting in Copilot, it's prompting directly with the data trained specifically in your Vena instance and your Vena model. So it's not going to try to go out there and seek out anything beyond that model. Now, what Vena has done is they've built a very finance-focused data model with the different rules and engines behind that. So typically, it wouldn't do that type of things, right? But to the point where if Vena does now offer an MCP, so you could connect Vena data out as well to Claude or outside as well. That's when you're probably more susceptible to any of those hallucinations potentially. Now that you've gone beyond that model outside of Vena as well.
Cool. That's helpful. And I think that was all that was logged in the Q&A. We can actually, if anybody has questions, you could come off mute, maybe raise your hand. I could take off mute. We can have a collaboration and discussion here for the next few minutes. And again, the question doesn't have to be necessarily just on what was shown today. If you have a question just about FP&A or forecasting planning in general, or even just NetSuite in general, we're happy to try to facilitate, what's top of mind with folks, and maybe what was some of the bigger takeaways from today's session. We got any more questions here? I'm going to go ahead and dismiss that one. Anybody want to chime in here towards the end of our call? Any questions, anything top of mind? Don't be scared. We appreciate collaboration. It's a safe place. We're here to learn and all get better. There's tons to learn in this space. AI is changing constantly. The tools are changing constantly. So please, raise your hand if you want. We can have a chat. Let's see. Maybe while we're waiting we'll give it a minute or so. I get it. If there's no questions, that's no problem either. But we'll give another minute or so. If you do have any questions, either put them in the Q&A or again, raise your hand. You could come off mute. Maybe Will, Kelly, anything else that you'd like to add as we're looking to wrap up here towards the end? Maybe some takeaways or anything else that you're seeing that's still fairly challenging?
Maybe Kelly first, if there's anything. I know.
Well, I think the key questions that do come up are AI is just moving so fast. So you've got multiple options, and I think most of the vendors that we see are adopting MCP. So one of the things that is going to be very interesting is how does all of that get priced out? If you're using NetSuite Next, MCP, Claude, you've got a Vena tool. Things could get pretty interesting in terms of licensing, looking at your token usage, and so I think a lot of planning will have to be done on what's the best approach to get at data with AI.
That's helpful, Kelly. We did get a few more questions logged in the Q&A. Roy's coming back. What is the NetSuite version of Vena? Would that be budget and planning? I believe it's called NSPAB, NetSuite Planning and Budgeting. Yeah, you have to check that out. I always recommend people, if you're looking, you should explore all your options. Start with NetSuite if you have NetSuite, because you should. But sometimes people have found, NetSuite's a great system, no doubt, but really you should look at your options and see and compare, because there could be quite a bit of variability in what they do from a functions, features, usability perspective. So definitely, yeah, there would be NetSuite planning and budgeting. Okay, and then we have another question here. With Claude, NetSuite MCP, in my experience, I use the Opus module over anything else because hallucinations are minimal and it works best for financial and operational analysis. Just a comment, so not a question. That's helpful, Inslaw. I guess I would maybe ask, are you using Excel though, or where are you using Opus? Like, what is your point of interaction or interface with AI? And I could take you off mute if you want to chime in. Did you want to add anything there, Inslav? I took you off mute if you wanted to chime in more. You could unmute yourself.
Can you hear me? Is
Yeah,
it
we can
working?
hear you. Yep.
Yeah, well, basically, what I do is I was using it with Excel in the past, but I switched completely to I'm a little bit more advanced in SQL, so I do like the SQL statements, select statements, and then dump them into Claude and run them through Claude. So everything happens very quickly, and analytics are pretty accurate because I pull the data directly through SQL. And yeah, I mean I completely, I mean, I'd say I used to use almost 100% of the time Excel. Now I'm probably only 20% of the time using Excel versus mostly Claude and SQL queries. So
Got it.
I
No,
find it very, very quick and very accurate as well.
that's helpful. I appreciate you coming off mute. Like I said, I know a lot of people are shy. I guess one question, what would be your biggest takeaway from today's class? Did you learn anything new? Hopefully, anything to share? What was the biggest takeaway?
Oh, definitely. I mean, these additional tools, I mean, they're very helpful. I'm definitely going to speak to our CFO about this because I know they have some issues. Actually, they're undergoing an audit right now, but
Okay.
as soon as they're done, I'm going to reintroduce this to them so they can maybe get something out
Okay.
of it.
No, great. Well, I appreciate that. Like we said, guys, we'll post out the recording and the link to the materials. You also have our contact information, Will and Kelly, if you want to learn more about, particular topic, particular issue, what you're going through. Again, we're happy to, jump on and see if we can help. That's the spirit of what we try to do here. So appreciate that, Inslav. And I'm just gonna check if we had any more questions. There's nothing else in the Q&A. We are pretty much towards the end of our time here. So I guess I will say, Kelly and Will, anything else you'd like to add before we wrap and conclude this month's masterclass?
I guess there is a question about MPC and using that within Vena. So Will, I don't know if we've seen that.
I just
That's
replied
a
back
great question.
to Harry there. So that's where the MCP server kicks in. It gives us that bridge between Vena and Claude in a safe way where you don't need to export the data first. It bridges it directly into Claude and you could prompt your Vena data directly. In terms of the final takeaways, I think for me, it's really there's no need to rush your FP&A transformation. It's not going to happen overnight. You could, as you guys have seen those different methods through today's session, But as it evolves, the complexity grows. That's, then grow alongside that vision alongside it.
Perfect. Well, well, Kelly, Will, appreciate it. We put a lot into this, these classes, and I hope you guys hopefully learned something here or found it valuable today. Again, follow us on LinkedIn, reach out to us. We'll get the material and recording out, but really appreciate you all spending some of your time on a Friday with us, in the spirit of learning and seeing what's out there. So, Kelly, Will, thank you for participating and joining us today.
Thank you, Dean.
Thanks,
See
everybody.
you guys on the next
Thanks for
class.
having us.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
everybody.
Bye.
See ya.